The entire village of Okoro gathered in the square that morning. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Chief Daniel Adewale, one of the richest men in all of Lagos, was on his knees. His expensive suit was covered in dust. His eyes were filled with tears. And standing before him was Grace, the poor orphan girl everyone had mocked for years. "I abandoned your mother," the billionaire said, his voice shaking. "I left her with nothing. I broke my promise. And because of me you suffered." Grace stood frozen. Her hands trembled. Around her neck was the old, faded necklace, the only thing her mother had left her. How did a dirty, forgotten girl end up face to face with one of the most powerful men in Nigeria? And what did that necklace have to do with it all? 3 months earlier, Grace woke up before sunrise just like every other day. The small mat she slept on was torn and uncomfortable. The room was cold and smelled like old wood. Her aunt, Mrs. Benita, was already shouting from the kitchen. "Grace, get up, you lazy girl. The clothes won't wash themselves." Grace quickly stood up and tied her wrapper around her waist. She didn't say anything. She had learned long ago that talking back only made things worse. Her aunt appeared in the doorway, arms folded and face twisted in anger. "You think because your mother is dead you can just sleep all day? You eat my food. You live under my roof. The least you can do is work." Grace nodded quietly. "Yes, Aunt Benita." She picked up the heavy basket filled with dirty clothes and walked out of the house. The sun was just beginning to rise over the village. A few chickens ran across the dirt path. Some children stared at her as she passed. One of them whispered loudly, "There goes the river rat." Another laughed. "She's so dirty. Even the water can't wash her clean." Grace kept her head down and kept walking. She had heard worse. Words didn't hurt as much as hunger. Words didn't bruise like Aunt Benita's slaps. The river was her only peace. It was the one place where no one yelled at her. Where she could be alone with her thoughts. Where she could remember her mother. Her mother, Ifeoma, had died 3 years ago. Grace was only 12 then. She remembered her mother's soft voice, her warm hands, and the way she used to sing while cooking. But most of all, she remembered her mother's last words. "Never take off this necklace, Grace. Never. It is proof. One day you will understand." Grace touched the necklace now as she walked. It was old and faded. The metal was dull. But she had never removed it. Not once. What did her mother mean by proof? Proof of what? Grace didn't know. But she had promised. And she would keep that promise forever. She reached the river and knelt by the water. The cool morning air felt good on her skin. She began to wash the clothes one by one, scrubbing them against the smooth stones. As she worked, she sang softly, the same song her mother used to sing. The song made her feel less alone. It made her feel like her mother was still there, somewhere watching over her. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. Grace turned around and saw a man standing on the path. He was tall and well-dressed. His shoes were shiny and expensive. He looked completely out of place in the village. He was staring at her. No, not at her. At her necklace. His face went pale. His mouth opened but no words came out. His hands began to shake. Grace stood up slowly, confused and a little frightened. "Sir, can I help you?" The man took a step closer. His voice was barely a whisper. Where did you get that necklace? Why was this stranger so afraid of a simple necklace?" Grace took a step back. The man's eyes were locked on her necklace like he had seen a ghost. "My mother gave it to me," she said quietly. "Before she died." The man's face changed. Pain filled his eyes. He looked like he might cry. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Ifeoma," Grace answered. "Ifeoma Okafor." The man closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, tears were running down his face. "Ifeoma," he whispered. "Oh God, Ifeoma." Grace didn't understand. Who was this man? Why was he crying over her mother's name? Before she could ask, the man turned and walked away quickly. He didn't say another word. He just disappeared down the path like a shadow. Grace stood there, confused and shaken. Her heart was beating fast. She looked down at the necklace and touched it gently. What just happened? That evening, Grace returned home with the clean clothes. Her aunt was waiting for her at the door, looking angry as always. "You took too long. What were you doing at that river? Playing around?" "No, Aunt Benita. I was working. I promise." Her aunt grabbed the basket and looked through the clothes. She found a small stain on one of the shirts. "You call this clean? You useless girl." She slapped Grace across the face. The pain was sharp and hot. Grace didn't cry. She had learned not to cry. Tears only made Aunt Benita angrier. Go to your room. No food tonight. Grace nodded and walked to her small room. She lay down on her mat and touched her cheek where her aunt had hit her. She thought about the strange man at the river. She thought about the way he looked at her necklace. She thought about her mother. "Mama," she whispered into the darkness. "What does this necklace mean? Who was that man?" No answer came. Only silence. The next morning, Grace went back to the river. She had more clothes to wash. Her aunt had given her even more work than usual. As she scrubbed the clothes, she kept looking around. Part of her wondered if the strange man would come back. And then he did. This time he wasn't alone. Another man was with him, older, wearing traditional clothes and beads. He looked like one of the village elders. The well-dressed man walked up to Grace slowly. His face was calm now, but his eyes were still sad. "Please," he said gently. "I need to talk to you. My name is Daniel Adewale. I knew your mother many years ago." Grace's hands stopped moving. She stared at him. "You knew my mother?" "Yes," Daniel said. "We were very close. Before she married your father. Before everything changed." The elder with him nodded respectfully at Grace. "Child, this man has traveled from Lagos to find you. Please listen to what he has to say." Grace slowly stood up. Her wet hands were shaking. Daniel looked at the necklace again. Fresh tears filled his eyes. "I gave that necklace to your mother 20 years ago. I promised her I would come back and marry her. But I didn't. I left her. I chose money and power over love." Grace felt her chest tighten. She couldn't breathe. "I searched for success in Lagos," Daniel continued. "I became rich. I became powerful. But I forgot about her. I forgot my promise." He wiped his eyes. "By the time I tried to find her again, it was too late. She was already gone." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "She waited for you." Daniel's face broke. "I know." What would Grace do now that she knew the truth? Grace felt anger rising inside her chest. This man, this rich, powerful man, had abandoned her mother. He had left her with nothing. "She died poor," Grace said, her voice shaking. "She died sick and broken. And I had to live with Aunt Benita. Do you know what that's been like?" Daniel looked down at the ground. Shame covered his face. "No," he said quietly. "But I want to know. I want to understand what my mistake cost you." Grace laughed bitterly. It was a sound she had never made before. "Your mistake? You call it a mistake?" She pulled up her sleeve and showed him the bruises on her arm. Old ones and new ones. Purple and yellow and brown. "My aunt beats me. She calls me useless. She makes me work from sunrise to sunset. I sleep on a torn mat. I eat once a day if I'm lucky." Daniel's face went pale. The elder beside him shook his head sadly. "The village children call me names," Grace continued. "They throw stones at me. They say I'm cursed. They say my mother was a fool for waiting for a man who never came back." Her voice broke. "And they were right. She was a fool. Because you never came back." Daniel fell to his knees right there by the river. Tears poured down his face. "You're right," he said. "Everything you said is true. I destroyed her life. And I destroyed yours. I am the fool. I am the curse." Grace didn't know what to say. She had imagined this moment before, meeting the man her mother had loved. But she never imagined it would feel like this. She felt angry. She felt sad. She felt confused. "Why are you here now?" she asked. "Why did you come back?" Daniel looked up at her. "Because I've spent 20 years trying to fill the hole in my heart with money and power. But nothing worked. I never stopped thinking about your mother. I never stopped regretting what I did." He stood up slowly. "When I saw that necklace yesterday, I knew. I knew Ifioma had a child. I knew I had to find you. What do you want from me?" Grace asked. "Nothing," Daniel said. "I don't deserve anything from you. But I want to give you something. I want to give you the life your mother should have had. The life you should have had." Grace shook her head. "I don't want your money." "It's not about money," Daniel said. "It's about responsibility. It's about making things right, even though I know I can never truly make things right." The elder stepped forward. "Child, this man has come with an honest heart. At least hear what he has to say." Grace looked at both of them. She looked at the necklace around her neck. She thought about her mother's last words. "It is proof," her mother had said. Proof of what? Proof of a broken promise? Proof of abandonment? Or proof that someone had once loved her mother enough to give her something precious? Grace didn't know, but she decided to listen. "Speak," she said to Daniel. "I will listen. But I promise nothing." What plan did Daniel have? and would Grace accept it? Daniel took a deep breath. I want to take you away from here. I want to give you an education. A real home. A future. Grace stared at him. Why would you do that? Because it's what I should have done for your mother, Daniel said. Because you are suffering for my sins. And because... He paused. His voice became softer. Because when I look at you, I see her. I see Ifioma. And I can't walk away again. Grace felt something twist inside her heart. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. To escape Aunt Benita. To escape the river. To escape this life of pain. But another part of her was afraid. What if this man was lying? What if he abandoned her too? I need time to think, Grace said. Daniel nodded. I understand. I'm staying at the guest house in town. Take all the time you need. He turned to leave, then stopped. Grace, I know I can never replace what you lost. But I want to try. Please let me try. Then he walked away with the elder, leaving Grace alone by the river once again. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Daniel's offer. She kept touching the necklace. Her aunt's voice broke through her thoughts. Grace, come here. Grace got up and walked to the main room. Aunt Benita was standing there with her arms crossed. Her eyes were full of suspicion. I heard something interesting today, Aunt Benita said. People are saying a rich man from Lagos came to see you. Is that true? Grace hesitated. Yes. Aunt Benita's eyes went wide. Then she smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was greedy. A rich man? Coming to see you? What did he want? He knew my mother, Grace said carefully. And? What else? Did he give you money? No. Aunt Benita grabbed Grace's arm tightly. You're lying. What did he give you? What did he say? Nothing, Aunt Benita. I promise. Her aunt's grip tightened. If that man gives you anything, money, gifts, anything, you will give it to me. Do you understand? I raised you. I fed you. You owe me. Grace pulled her arm away. For the first time in years, she looked her aunt straight in the eyes. You didn't raise me. You treated me like a slave. Aunt Benita's face turned red with anger. She raised her hand to slap Grace. But Grace caught her wrist. No, Grace said firmly. Not anymore. Aunt Benita stared at her in shock. Grace had never fought back before. Never. You ungrateful. I'm leaving, Grace said. I'm going with that man. And you can't stop me. Aunt Benita laughed cruelly. Leaving? With some stranger? You think he really cares about you? He'll use you and throw you away just like everyone else. Those words hurt. They hit Grace right in her heart. Because part of her feared the same thing. What if Aunt Benita was right? What if Daniel didn't really care? What if this was all just guilt, and once his guilt was satisfied, he would leave her again? Grace turned and walked back to her room. She lay on her mat and cried quietly. She pulled the necklace close to her chest. Mama, she whispered. What should I do? Please show me a sign. Would Grace find the courage to trust again, or would fear keep her trapped forever? The next morning, Grace made her decision. She packed her few belongings into a small bag, 2 old dresses, her mother's photo, and nothing else. She walked to the guest house in town where Daniel was staying. Her heart was pounding with every step. When she arrived, Daniel was sitting outside. He stood up immediately when he saw her. Grace, he said softly. I'll go with you, Grace said. But I have conditions. Daniel nodded. Tell me. I want to go to school. I want to learn to read and write properly. I want to be someone my mother would be proud of. Done, Daniel said. And I want you to tell the truth, Grace continued. I want everyone in this village to know what you did. I want them to know why my mother died poor. I want them to know why I suffered. Daniel's face became serious. You want me to confess publicly? Yes, Grace said firmly. No more secrets. No more shame. The truth must be told. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're right. I'll do it. 3 days later, the village gathered in the square. The elders sat in their chairs. The villagers stood in groups, whispering and wondering why Chief Daniel Adewale had called this meeting. Aunt Benita was there too, standing at the front with a fake smile on her face. She thought this meeting was about money. She thought Daniel was going to give the family a gift. She had no idea what was really coming. Daniel stood in the center of the square. Grace stood beside him, wearing a simple dress he had bought for her. The necklace hung around her neck, visible to everyone. Daniel raised his hand and the crowd became silent. People of Okoro, he began. I have come here to tell you a story. A story of love, betrayal, and consequences. The crowd leaned in, listening carefully. 20 years ago, I lived in this village. I was young and ambitious, and I fell in love with a woman named Ifeoma Okafor. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some of the older people remembered that name. I promised to marry her, Daniel continued. I gave her this necklace as proof of my promise. But then I left for Lagos. I told her I would return after I made my fortune. His voice grew heavy with shame. But I never came back. I forgot about her. I chose wealth over love. I broke my promise. The crowd gasped. Some people shook their heads in disappointment. Ifeoma waited for me, Daniel said. She never married anyone else. She held on to hope until the day she died. She died poor. She died alone. And she left behind a daughter. He turned to Grace. This is Grace, Ifeoma's daughter. The girl you have mocked and mistreated for years. The crowd went silent. Every eye turned to Grace. Aunt Benita's face went pale. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Daniel's voice became firm and strong. Because of my abandonment, this innocent girl has suffered. She has been beaten, starved, treated like a slave by her own family. He turned to Aunt Benita. You, Benita Okafor, took in your sister's child, not out of love but out of duty. And you made her pay for it every single day. Aunt Benita's mouth opened and closed like a fish. What would happen next? Justice or more pain? Daniel wasn't finished. He turned back to the crowd, his voice echoing across the square. I stand before you today to take full responsibility. Grace's suffering is my fault. Her pain is my burden. And I will spend the rest of my life making it right. Then, in front of everyone, Daniel knelt down. He knelt before Grace, the same way we saw at the beginning of this story. The entire village watched in stunned silence. Some people covered their mouths in shock. Others whispered to each other. Grace, Daniel said, his voice shaking with emotion. I cannot undo the past. I cannot bring your mother back. But I can honor her memory by honoring you. Tears filled Grace's eyes. Her hands trembled at her sides. I am asking you to marry me, Daniel continued. Not because I pity you. Not because I feel guilty, though I do. But because I see in you the same strength and grace your mother had. I see a woman worthy of love, respect, and a future filled with hope. The crowd gasped. Aunt Benita's face turned white as chalk. She looked like she might collapse. Grace stood there, looking down at this powerful man on his knees. The same man who had abandoned her mother. The same man whose choices had caused her so much pain. She thought about her mother's face. Her mother's voice. Her mother's final words about the necklace being proof. Now she understood. The necklace was proof that someone had once loved her mother. Proof that promises, even broken ones, could one day be made right. Grace spoke clearly so everyone could hear. If I agree to marry you, I have conditions. Daniel nodded. Tell me. My voice will always matter, Grace said firmly. My dignity will never be questioned. My past will be respected, not hidden or erased. And I will never be treated as less than your equal. I promise you all of that, Daniel said. On my life I promise. Grace looked at the faces in the crowd. She saw the people who had mocked her. The people who had thrown stones. The people who had turned away when her aunt beat her. She could have said no. She could have walked away and left them all behind forever. But Grace was not her aunt. She was not driven by bitterness or revenge. Then I accept, she said quietly. Daniel stood up, relief and joy flooding his face. He didn't hug her or touch her. He simply placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head in gratitude. The village elder stood and spoke loudly. Benita Okafor, you have disgraced your family and abused an innocent child. From this day you have no authority over Grace. Leave this gathering. Aunt Benita stumbled backward, shame covering her face like a shadow. She turned and fled from the square, unable to face the judgment of the village. Grace watched her go. She felt no happiness in her aunt's fall. Only a quiet sense of freedom. The wedding happened 3 months later. It was small and simple, not the grand ceremony people expected from a billionaire. Grace wore a plain white dress and her mother's necklace. Daniel wore a simple suit. They exchanged vows under a tree with only a few close friends watching. I promise to protect your voice, Daniel said. I promise to trust again, Grace replied. After the wedding, Grace did not immediately move into Daniel's mansion in Lagos. First, she needed to heal. Daniel arranged for her to stay in a quiet house near the city. He gave her space. He gave her time. He gave her books and teachers. Grace spent the next year learning. She studied mathematics, literature, and history. She learned about business and law. Her mind, which had been starved for so long, drank in knowledge like water. She grew stronger. She grew confident. She discovered that she was not just a girl who washed clothes by a river. She was intelligent. She was capable. She was worthy. And slowly, carefully, Grace learned to trust Daniel. Not because of his money or his promises, but because he kept showing up. He respected her space. He listened to her voice. He treated her like an equal. 1 year after their wedding, Grace made a decision. "I want to go back to Okoro," she told Daniel. He looked surprised. "Why?" "Because there are other girls there," Grace said. "Girls like I was. Girls who are suffering in silence. And I want to help them." Daniel smiled. "Then let's help them." Together they returned to the village. But this time, Grace didn't come as a victim. She came as a woman of purpose. She established the Ifeoma Foundation, named after her mother. The foundation provided shelter, food, education, and protection for orphaned and abused girls in the village. The villagers who once mocked her now looked at her with respect. The children who called her names now called her Auntie Grace, and asked for her help with their schoolwork. Grace even visited Aunt Benita one last time. Her aunt was old now, living alone in her small house. When she saw Grace at her door, fear filled her eyes. "I didn't come for revenge," Grace said gently. "I came to tell you that I forgive you." Aunt Benita stared at her in disbelief. "Forgiveness doesn't mean what you did was right," Grace continued. "It means I'm choosing peace over bitterness. I'm choosing freedom over anger." She turned to leave, then paused. "I hope you find peace too, Aunt Benita." As Grace walked away from that house, she touched the necklace around her neck. The proof her mother spoke of. Proof that love, even when broken, can be redeemed. Proof that truth and accountability can heal the deepest wounds. Proof that a poor girl washing clothes by a river can rise with dignity and purpose to change the world. Her mother had been right all along. Grace smiled as the sun set over Okoro village. Her story had begun in suffering, but it ended in hope. And that made all the difference. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?